So the question is, are we ready to kick a grandma's ass today? It's Romania Black, and I think we are. It is Romania Black. We're on episode 4 of DanDaDan, and I'm really excited. I will be honest with you all. The last 2 days, I have not felt wonderful at all, and so this is like the first day that I feel a bit invigorated. I feel back on my feet. I'm like at 78% right now, which is all right. Which is good. But I was like, I want to watch something. And I was like, I have my Empire shirt on today. I was like, it feels like a DanDaDan shirt. So let's just get in the mood. Let's roll with it. So I do have some comments because now episode 1 and 2 have been out on Patreon. And episode 1 has come out on YouTube. I've not checked the YouTube comments yet because the moderators usually wait till the weekend to get to them. But I do have some comments from episode 1. From Patreon. And then I had a comment that came up from episode 2 on Discord. So if you're watching and you want to join the Discord and talk about DanDaDan with us, you can join for $1. And if you want to see next week's episode early, it's just $5 along with all the other shows for the month. So it's a pretty sweet deal. It's the price of a cheeseburger at the drive-in. I think that's not too shabby myself, but so anyway, Zekutar the Immortal for episode 1 said that the condition of the friend, that what I thought the condition was, is called vitiligo pigmentation, but they say that's not the case. They said that another person here posted in greater detail about Momo's friend's fashion style, Gyaru, which we talked about in episode 3, which includes tanning the skin while leaving portions lighter with makeup and having lighter or even blonde hair. Now, Moomin followed up that comment and said that within the Gyaru trend is this tribal makeup called Gengaro, which is a facet of the Gyaru style, which I'm sure is what Zekutar was talking about, that is definitely a rebellious trend that goes against the typical look girls are supposed to portray. I looked this up, and yeah, the Gengaro style of where it's like the anime makes it almost look like a skin condition, but it's like Jersey Shore. Like you wear the sunglasses when you tan and it leaves that part lighter and that part darker. It's a very interesting thing. I will tell you all the amount of people that went into great detail to tell me about the Gyaru style, and I was sitting there looking at episode 1 comments going, well, when we get to episode 3, you're going to hear me talk about that. But I appreciate people trying to tell me ahead of time. But again, if she's going to mention it later, don't you worry. I'll get to it. But Moomin also says that the aliens remind me of 2 Ultraman monsters that are smashed together, which are interesting. And she went on to go in greater detail with that. And then Moomin also said that it's good that Momo kicked alien, but by the way, their bunny that they own likes bananas too. Which is great to note. Yeah, I had not thought about rabbits eating bananas. It made me think of Motozushi, but it is what it is. Alexander Q says, I take it since the alien dudes do not need females in their species to reproduce, ergo they are not in danger of going extinct, it seems their reason for wanting Momo's banana is not to be able to evolve, is to be able to evolve. Does that mean that the dudes we met are the crazies of their species? I hadn't thought about this, but yeah, what if the banana-loving aliens that we saw in episode 1 are like the redneck hillbillies of their alien race and like the conspiracy tinfoil hat crazies that have just gone to Earth being ridiculous? I actually kind of love that because usually the stereotype is when it's aliens or an extraterrestrial species, they're like this advanced knowledge or insane brain, much higher capabilities of understanding than the human race. No, I would love it if these aliens are dipshits that are just dumb as a box of rocks hillbillies. I would love that. That would be such a great twist. I would be 100% for it. We can only see what we're going to get if we see them again. So we'll see. But in episode 2, I asked the question, so guys, are you always aware of your penis? I just put that question out there. I haven't seen the YouTube follow-up to this, so we'll see how that goes. But Nicholas in the Discord replied saying, I would definitely say teenagers in the throes of puberty are very much aware of their penis at all times, which is insane to me. So I'm sorry for you in that. I took this 2 ways. Personally, one, that Okarun is very much not in tune with his sexual organ, and perhaps his role as quote-unquote one of the guys. This show's world seems like all the guys are picking on him in episode 1 and they are aggressive, he is passive, etc. He's a nerd, they are jocks, etc. And also assuming being one of the guys is being sexually aggressive, much like Momo's ex-boyfriend from episode 1. Which I think is a very fair point. That's what I kind of love about Okarun, is that he's not one of the guys. Honestly, the whole alpha male thing, it rubs me the wrong way in so many different reasons, for so many different reasons. But I think the biggest one is when I see guys on the internet that promote like the alpha male thing and they're like, why don't women love us? And I'm like, well, maybe don't be an asshole. I'm like, women, it's not that women don't like manly men. A lot of women do. Like women are like men. We all have our own types. We all have body types that we like. Some women like heavier set guys. Some women like tall and gangly guys. Some women like blondes. Some women like dark-haired men. Like everybody has a different type. But I think universally, most women don't like sexually aggressive creeps. They just don't. And I think that that's the problem, is that whole alpha male mentality promotes sexual aggressiveness, and it promotes guys being creepy and unnatural. Just be your damn self and be nice. Like if you're just a decent human being, it will take you so far, you know? So anyway, tangent over. 2, the show may be stretching the suspension of disbelief a bit. I have conflicting views whether the show is doing one or the other. Yeah, and that's kind of my thing I really like about this show, is I like that it pushes the boundaries of certain things. Like I've said in the last couple of episodes, there are aspects of it that kind of come close to the line, and the whole aspect with the granny and some of her positions last episode, I was like, I don't know. But for the most part, like 90% of the time, it does it in a very clever way, and it's doing it in a way that's sparking some genuine conversation about gender and about sex, and doing so in a way that is interesting. And I appreciate that a lot, especially in a modern show. We're in 2025. I think we can talk about this and do it in a way that kind of comes at it from both perspectives. So awesome. I'm 100% here for it. So that's exciting. But yeah. So I'm really excited. I do have my internet back. Oh, praise be. So I do have my internet back. So we are watching this on the streaming service. I do have English subtitles ready to go. We shall see. I was told in the Discord, and it's not really a spoiler, but I know it now, so I can't go back. But they did say episode 3 was the only episode of the season with an after credit scene. So that is good to know. That is good to know. I won't be wasting my time waiting on the after credits. But in any sense, I have my hydration beside me, which is exciting, and I'm ready to go. So I hope you all are excited for episode 4 as well. We'll be a third of the way done with the season after this episode. Wild. Anyway, we are going to start episode 4 of DanDaDan, and we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's jam. Oh, you know what? Sometimes they say that you start out a series, and by the 3rd episode, it's like whether or not you're hooked. I will make the argumentation that this is the episode when you get hooked. Because I loved this episode. This has been my favorite episode so far. This episode was amazing. It was the action, the animation, Momo and Ken working together, the whole thing with Turbo Granny and where the spirit comes back to. Oh. I didn't bring Whiteboard Coon out for this, but we are going to talk about Turbo Granny in relation to the aliens. For sure. For sure we are going to talk about that. But this episode was just absolutely amazing. I loved so much about that. Also kind of subverting expectations. Usually when an anime starts out with the OP, you're like, oh shit. But in this case, they built it up and then they dropped that OP and it was like, oh shit, we're getting into this. So there was so much that was clever about this episode, about kicking Turbo Granny's ass, that I love so much. I freaking love these two. Ken and Momo they're just, mwah, love them to pieces. I love Momo being like, but look, you have to go first because I'm all teary-eyed. And he calls her bluff and he's like, bitch, no, you got dry-eyed. You are not dry-eyed one bit. Just go on, let's go. But I love the idea of them going together. It's great. And then walking side by side until they get to Turbo Granny. And then the one thing was, as they were telling their entire plan in the tunnel, I'm like, why wouldn't you debrief outside the tunnel, outside her territory, and then go in? But I digress. It didn't matter in the end, but I was sitting there being like, don't give away your plan. Honestly, I thought of two things when we saw the giant Turbo Granny. The style of it reminded me of Berserk, but it also made me think of Attack on Titan. Like they just flip the light and there's a Titan right there. Like what the fudge? Which y'all can comment down below about the Attack on Titan reference. You can talk down below about that. I'm not going to spoil it in here, but the idea of two of them is so interesting. I also like the world building where the tunnel itself, because we've established in previous episodes that the tunnel is encapsulated with the grandmother, with the Turbo Granny's spirit, that it's this idea that everything that is involved or gets encompassed by the tunnel or consumed by it becomes part of it. So the crab, for example, I love the crab and the kind of crabs going across the river Styx and the tide and mythology with that. Like that part was really cool, but I just thought it was really good. And I love the idea of Ken and Momo working together, of Okarun and Momo working together. Now, here's my thing. At some point, I don't know, because we've defeated Turbo Granny, I don't know how Okarun is going to use these powers in the future. Obviously, they're going to, because the whole series kind of alludes to that. But I'm like, how does Okarun use the power of Turbo Granny if Turbo Granny's been defeated, quote unquote? That's going to be the big question going in episode 5, which I'm really curious about. But I think this episode, we're going to talk about it a little bit further as we get deeper into the episode. I think that at some point, Ken is going to have to find a way to use his powers without relying on Momo. And I like the concept of them working together. What I don't want is for this series to become every other shonen that I've ever watched, where it's like, all right, lady character, thanks for the moral support, but you go stand over there now and I'll save the day. I don't want that, because we've seen that how many times in how many shonen, and I would much rather see them both work side by side, because as this episode shows, they work really well together. They have ways that they can fill in each other's deficits and bounce off each other and work really well. But the scales are kind of tipped right now in Momo's favor, which is a rarity, but it is kind of tipped in Momo's favor, where if Momo isn't controlling Turbo Granny, or if Momo isn't kind of guiding Okarun, then he can't quite control the powers. And I think moving forward, it will put them at more of a disadvantage if Ken can't find a way to control the powers on his own without Momo having to like do this extra step. Because it is a disadvantage to her. She has some amazing abilities, like the idea of making her spirit energy like become a tangible thing and be able to grab things, be able to be used as wings, literally, be able to grab onto things. Like she has such a great ability that is very useful. But if part of her energy and focus is on making sure that Okarun can do his thing, then that's taking advantage of what she can do. And in a pinch, that might become a major disadvantage down the road. So I would like to keep them working together as a pair, because I think they do that really well. But Ken's going to have to find a way to be able to use his powers, if he still can, and be able to do that without having Momo to have her hands on him at all times. Also, I think it's really important the fact that her ability, that she's a woman, using this ability to kind of keep Turbo Granny in check, is interesting, knowing what we know now about the Turbo Granny spirit. But we'll tackle that when we do. I do, the fact we've talked about in previous episodes, but the fact that Turbo Granny's spirit inside of him is like, nope, I don't think I can do it anymore. I'm really depressed. I don't know if that has to do with with Turbo Granny's essence and the fact that it kind of like depowers his motivation. I don't know if that has to do with Turbo Granny's spirit's origins and the ties to the women that have been sexually assaulted, which we'll get back to. I don't know if it's related to that, or if it's tied to just Okarun's personality and the fact that he's just like, in his own like insecurities, man. It's one of those things where even though he has superpowers, he still has insecurities and they're still manifesting, which is Which is so true. And it kind of adds this layer of realism to the power fantasy, because it like Superman, for example, is a power fantasy. It's like we all want to be super powerful man and be able to be bulletproof and move faster than a speeding train or a speeding bullet or whatever. But at the end of the day, it's kind of that message of just because you gain a supernatural ability does not mean that you're not also potentially depressed. It's superpowers are not a cure for mental health issues, is basically what this series is maybe getting at. But I feel bad for Ken saying he's utterly useless, right? Although I will say, after watching so many shonen, and I say this as a female reader and viewer, after watching so many shonen where I've had to see the female character sitting on the ground going, I'm so useless, I wish I could be more help, I wish I was more powerful, it is nice to see the shoe on the other foot. It is nice for a moment to see the shoe on the other foot, even though I want Okarun to get over his feelings of uselessness and to be able to manifest that for himself. I would like that. But I will say, as going on and seeing Bulma and Orihime and so many other characters be like, I just wish my powers could do more. Like, after seeing that so many, or I wish I could be of more help, it is nice to see it on the other foot for one time, if only. But I do want Okarun to get over that, because him and Momo work really well together. And it's great. Everything was so smart about this episode, though, with Turbo Granny and the fact that she was manifesting through the tunnel, the power of the curse. She gave him back his penis, but then does he have his penis? Is that still a thing? I kind of like, we'll talk about the granny and God, that scene at the end in the house, but I kind of wanted to know, like, did he get it back? Because he was able to be, Turbo Granny mode at the end of this, and then he wasn't. So I'm like, did he get it back now that the granny was destroyed? We are assuming so, but we didn't get confirmation. It's like, no penis, no death, one of those things. But yeah, so she's like, I'm going to eat you up. That scene where she was about to eat them both, that was so good. I loved that scene so much. That was just, and then Momo being like, nuh-uh, I'm going to taunt you to a race. One thing that I love about Momo is her character is smart. She has street smarts. She pays attention. She's able to rationalize things and figure out a method of what to do. I love Momo's character. She's so smart and she's so concise. And I love that she's able to think on her feet as she goes. That is so good. I love it. Like, I love Okarun's passion and I love his consideration and I love how supportive he is. It is very much a flip from how you usually see it in the shonen formula. Because the shonen formula, Momo's character would usually be male, and Okarun's character would usually be female. The one thing I don't like that this series does is it makes fun of Okarun for that. Like with the grandmother saying, oh, what are you, not a man? I feel like that joking is a little bit dated, which she's the grandmother, she's Gen X. So that for her to make that kind of, ribbing at him makes sense for her character. But I feel like those types of stereotypes where she's like, be more of a man, I feel like that's very dated and kind of, and I don't want that to be, what I don't want Okarun to become is a jerk. I don't want him to become some jerk that's like, I'm here to save the day. Sit down, Momo, and don't worry about it anymore. I'm like, bitch, no, Momo can take care of herself. So I'm hoping the series never goes that route, because I'm like, don't do that. But it is a little bit like, I feel bad for Okarun because I like him being, not our stereotypical, like, hyper masculine prototype for a protagonist. Not that many anime protagonists are, they usually aren't, but I like that he's not. And I like the subversion that we get in this. I don't want that to change, but I don't want Okarun to be made fun of because he's different, right? So they end up challenging her. The whole idea of, the idea of timing the race in 10 minutes and then the Turbo Granny saying, well, you didn't specify how to time that 10 minutes. You didn't say how to do it. That was genius. Like, that was the monkey's paw of it all, that you did not specify how we're supposed to time this race. So I can count however I want to, but you didn't specify how to count. So what I also liked about this was that Momo kind of anticipated the possibilities that could happen, that the granny might cheat, or maybe she didn't and it all worked out in her favor. But I think that Momo anticipated that something might happen where they would be caught. And so she wanted maybe to find a way to get Turbo Granny to go in and possess Okaroon so that then she could grab hold and take the spirit. Or maybe she just worked on the fly and figured it out as she went. Either way, it worked out really good in her favor. So I thought that was really good. Now, Momo telling Ken, I'll probably be saving you next time. And then Ken being like, nope, I'm not going to just stand by. I like the fact that he doesn't just stand there and is helpless. I like that about his character. Again, we're, subverting gender expectations, but we're also playing into just good characterization. And I like the fact that Ken, who is used to running away from problems, tackles it head on, because up until now, he has relied upon Momo quite a bit because he's used to running away from his problems and Momo is used to tackling them head on. So that's just their personality types from the get-go. And him being like, I'm not running away from this and I'm not going to deal with waiting on Momo to rescue me. I'm going to save myself. I'm like, work, Ken, get it. The fact that he goes and bites at Granny's tit. Here's the thing though. Normally, I'd be like, what the fudge? But she did, if we recall, she did ask him to do that. So she did put it out there as a thing. But this entire thing about give me your weenie and sucking on my titty, it takes on a very serious tone by the end of this episode and carries a whole different meaning to it, which we'll talk about when we get there. But that makes you go, shit, that's why she's offering that up there, and it takes on a much more serious tone. But at the time we're watching this scene, we don't know that yet. So it very much is Okaroon saying, look, you asked me to do this. I'm going to do it because you said it was okay. Consent is important, correct? And he says, you gave me permission, so it's not like you said that I couldn't. And so at that point, then she possesses him, and that's when Momo gets the opportunity to take control of him. And the reason Turbo Granny wanted to possess him was to get rid of all the layers of the protective garments. But that allowed Momo to reach in with her sense of touch and take over Turbo Granny again. I like the fact that Turbo Granny comes out as this snake-like presence from behind Okaroon. However, I will say, if we're talking about this show and how it likes its sexual symbolism, does the snake coming out of the scarf and Okaroon look very much like a penis, especially when Momo is grabbing it and holding it nearly the entire time and steering with it? It does. It's very phallic. It's very phallic, and it is intended to be, I am sure. Also, the idea of sexuality and crabs, being an STI and all that. We're not going to avoid knowing about that either. I do absolutely love the concept of the crab having the faces on the back of it. Now, we find out later that the faces are tied to the women that were assaulted and left in the cave that were victims. If you've watched or read Heaven Official's Blessing, there is a connection to that series as well. I'm not going to spoil it, but we can comment and talk about it down below. That was very, very apparent in this episode with it. But we've established that Okaroon can only go turbo twice in one go before losing his abilities. So that's good to know. And we'll see if that changes any at all. I do love the idea of him transforming and then taking her with him. That part was really good. Even though he's depressed and he's like, oh, by the way, I can't make this curve. I can't make this curve while having you on my back. But yeah, definitely the idea of her grabbing onto a snake while she's, straddling the back of Okaroon. Nothing sexual about that whatsoever. Although I am glad they try to justify how they don't die when they fall off the cliff and land in the street, that the wires helped to break the fall on that. That part was really good. Also, when they fell off of the side of the cliff, there was this sense of vertigo. The way that they animated it. The way they animated it from the 15-minute marker on. Amazing. Or I guess it would be at the 10 marker on. There's 15 minutes left. Amazing, honestly. But yeah, the crab showing up. I love the fact that Momo was smart and thought of the hospital, Healthland. Healthland. I wish we had a Healthland. But I love the idea that she thought on the fly, being like, let's go in, go to the sauna, boil the crab. It'll slow it down. Genius. Absolutely genius. Our girl Momo's got some street smarts. And I love that. The other thing too is the fact that what I also loved was how the people in the episode thought it was an explosion, but the crab's presence was felt. Like, collateral damage did happen, which how they're going to explain all that, I'm sure they'll find a way. But I'm glad that the spirit and everything, it's not like in some series where stuff just happens and nobody reacts to it. There was collateral damage in this, but I'm with Ken though. How they ate crab meat after going through all this, I would have been like him. I've been like, no, I'm good. Actually, I think I'm just going to go and have some chicken over here and just settle down. It's fine. So also love Momo with the ponytail. Momo with the ponytail is super cute. Love that. And the idea of the zombie people that were called up from the cemetery, it was just like one thing after another. Like, as soon as the crab was destroyed, we're like, okay, we're out of the woods. And then Turbo Granny's like, nope, I got the spirits to come from the cemetery. And it's like, what? And it's like, well, how are we going to get to the city after using the turbo? Well, we're going to take a train. Then we're going to get on the train. And then all this stuff's going to happen. We're going to whip through the city using the telephone poles and the wires. It was giving me like season 3, episode 2 of Attack on Titan vibes. It was just, the animation was mwah, mwah. Everything. I was living. I almost couldn't react to anything because I was just so sucked up in the moment. I loved it. I was like, oh, everything about it was just absolutely wonderful, jaw-dropping. I also love this series using the red tones. I thought that was brilliant. I loved that. The crab design, now that I'm looking at it as it's sitting outside with the multiple mouths and the legs and the eyes, it's just so creepy. But yeah, the red toning in this episode was so fitting. I loved it. It kind of is like black and white, but obviously with it being red instead, I think it works so well. I love it. So yeah, and then and her superpowers being green contrasts with it so perfectly. I love that. Yeah, everything about this part of the episode was just, I love them. I love Okonoon and Momo working together so well. I don't know how the other characters are going to factor into all this, and I'm fine with other characters being involved, but I do kind of hope that we still get Momo and Ken working together because I want to see more of that. I also like that Momo is able to quickly figure out how to use her resources. So like she just looks at the train and figures out what she wants to do with that. And that part was really, really good. So yeah, I will say, as someone that has just been puking my guts up 24 hours ago, hearing her say that she wanted to puke out her organs, I was like, girl, let's not do that. Let's not do that, shall we? But yeah, so then they all work together, and then Turbo Granny comes out of the body, and she gets the crab, all the people together, and talks about them bullying elders. And I love when Momo says mad respect for that, and she's like, I don't like those punk words. And then she combines with the crab and all the spirits to create this just monstrous looking thing. It is just, it looks like a One Punch Man villain, if I'm being honest. I've only seen a couple episodes of One Punch Man, but that's exactly what it looks like. And she's like, 1 second, let me get on the train. Now, granted, Turbo Granny said that Momo didn't take into account curves and the train not going 120 miles per hour the entire time, but Momo's like, I didn't need any more than that. To my point, around the time that we're at the 17-minute mark where they're on top of the train and Momo has like her arms over Ken, on the one hand, I really did like this because I liked the fact of Momo and Ken working together and staying side by side. But on the other hand, this was the moment that I was like, Ken needs to find a way, if he still has the powers somehow, I don't know how that's going to happen, but if he does have the powers in the future, he does need to find a way to be able to use them himself. So we'll see where that goes, obviously. But yeah, then the granny showing up on the train tracks with the nails. Y'all, I was not anticipating her showing up, and there's all the different talismans on the poles and everything. Oh, it all being planned out. The question is, did Ken know the entire plan from the start about the train? Did he know? It seemed like Momo and the grandma kind of worked it out, but this part was just so good. I loved it so much. Welcome to Kamago City, you rotten bastard pigs. I love the grandma. And I love the grandma, and when she points her finger like the gun, phew, that part was so freaking good. And she points it like the cigarette. Interesting. And then Momo's like, I win. Now, at this part where she blows up Turbo Granny, and then we see the crab explode, and all the girls' bodies fly off of the crab at that point. And then we see all of like the residual, like just scum and everything come off of them as they float away. That part, and Momo seeing all of that. We'll tie back to that in just a second. But yeah. So Turbo Granny evaporates. They get off at the train station. Ken is like, what the fudge? I do respect, and this is a slight detail, but as someone that's watched other series make the gag, I'm glad that when Momo falls down, she's obviously wearing the skirt dress, and they don't go for a panty shot. It doesn't seem like a lot. That would seem like a very minute thing, but knowing the sexuality and the talk about it the show does, I'm glad they don't go that route. I'm glad they kept it classy. I was like, all right. And then they defeated him. So then we go to the scene here. I didn't want to be rough like this. I like the grandma's saying there. And the flowers next to the coffee on the cinder blocks. This is where girls around your age were violated, cut to pieces, and tossed away. And then knowing the history of the tunnel. They didn't become evil spirits because they wanted to. Yeah. We spirit mediums have long hunted Turbo Granny. Granny always showed up in places where spirits of girls met irrational deaths. Perhaps she went around, consoling the spirits of the girls who couldn't rest in peace. And Momo's tears in that scene are so valid, and it adds an entire layer to her, and it makes all the more sense now of why she wanted the man's penis almost as retribution for the sexual assault they did to all of those girls. And the idea of sucking on the tit being a reference to that sexual violation and that assault, and tying back to that, giving it a whole new meaning now. And the idea of her showing up where these deaths occurred, and the fact that Momo and Okarun didn't really exactly know that going in, so they didn't realize the ties to it at the start. But it has a huge value to that, and it's so tragic. And it just, adds where the spirit mediums were like, look, Turbo Granny's a problem, but she's not a problem because of what she is. It's just the results of all these negative spirits coming together. Oh, it just breaks my heart in that moment. The dead shouldn't assault the living. That's no good. We have to use force to send them to the other side. The same goes for the living. Yeah. It's like, the dead shouldn't be assaulting the living, but the living shouldn't be doing so either. And that idea of fighting back with force, of saying like, it shouldn't be that way, but sometimes it's what you've got to do. It adds a whole nother spin on it, and adds a whole nother layer. Don't do anything to mock the dead. Trample into their territory disrespectfully, and you can only blame yourself for your death. Basically, the grandmother's saying, like, those are the rules for living, and for the living and the dead to coexist. I like that it's basically the grandmother being like, look, that's why we don't believe in ghosts. That's why we don't mess with them, because there's a whole code to it, and you don't need to violate it. And she's like, but I'm glad you're okay. I like that the grandma's like just chugging a 40 while she gives Okarun like a thing of coffee. That's great. So then they go back to the house, to the grandmother's house, and they're eating crab meat of all things. And Ken's like, how did I get with this insane family? What is this? They're just insane with crab meat. Absolutely insane. I'm surprised that Okarun doesn't have like a reaction to the grandma saying that she was going to like ruin the Ken Takamura merch. I'm surprised he didn't connect 2 and 2 there, but how else would he know? Or at least question about it, but who knows? The 2 of them, when they look over to him about the crab and they both have the crab meat in their mouths, they are one and the same. It is actually insane. He's like, I don't want to eat the crab meat. He's like, I don't want to talk to anyone at all. Again, I don't like that the grandmother made fun of him for having the stuff down there. And I know that Momo says later that she's trying to like make him feel better and cheer him up. All I could think of is like if a character like, I'm not going to say Gojo or Sugar Ray from Fruits Basket or something was like making a comment about a woman's boobs or something. Again, I don't think Gojo would, but the idea of a mentor character making, I guess you know what the equivalent is? The equivalent is Master Roshi from Dragon Ball Z. That is the equivalent. Yes, it is. Okay, I was trying to think. I'm like, what is the equivalent of what she's doing to Okarun? The equivalent is Master Roshi asking to see Android 18 or Bulma's panties. That is the equivalent. That is the equivalent of it. That's exactly what it is. Okay. I kept the whole time the scene was happening, I was like, what is it? What am I trying to think of? That's the exact same example, only the genders are flipped. That's the example. Yes. So if you are perfectly fine with Master Roshi asking to see a lady's panties, then this part here about her asking to see Ken's penis is roughly about the same. I want Ken to be left alone. The thing about it is, I think, and this is an interesting conversation about gender in itself, because the thing about those 2 scenarios is Master Roshi in those episodes of Dragon Ball Z are not asking to see a woman's boobs or vagina or underwear to confirm her femininity. It's asking it to exploit it. And that's the difference. Like, the femininity has been confirmed. We're not calling it into question. We just want to exploit the fact that you have it. And that's the difference, because Granny isn't asking to see Ken's penis to exploit him. That would be wrong on many levels. She's asking about it to call his masculinity into question. So it's different. And so what do we do with that as an audience watching? How do we feel about that? For me, as a woman watching, I want them to leave him alone. And for him to be, because what I like about Ken is that he is such a compassionate and nice person. I don't want him to be this like loner douche that doesn't value Momo's help. Like, I don't want that to happen. So I'm like, no, let him be. He's fine. His masculinity is not a problem. He's secure enough in his masculinity. It's okay. But I don't know how a male audience treats this scene, or if you think anything less of it, right? I mean, as a woman growing up, the Roshi scenes kind of creeped me out a little bit. And I was like, which is why I liked when Android 18 was like shoved him away and pushed him away, like get the frick back. But that's how basically it's interesting that one scene is calling a gender and a sexuality into question, and the other scene is not doing it at all, but rather exploiting it. So it's interesting conversation. And I like that Momo clears up with Okarun that she's like, look, I wasn't trying to help you back there because my grandma, she means well. She's not serious about wanting to see your penis. She just wanted to cheer you up. And I like that Okarun does not accept that. He's like, oh, well, I'm sorry I made her, be so considerate. Not, I like that he's like, no, that's not an excuse. You can't just do that. The best part about the end of this episode was the fact that he thought that when they said goodbye, he wasn't going to see her at school again, or they weren't going to hang out, and that this was like a one-time deal, that it wasn't going to be something that happened in the future. I think he thought as he was going away that he wasn't going to see her anymore, and that they were just going to like ignore each other at school. But when she says, see you tomorrow, and he gets like his big old eyes, and he's like, okay. Oh, adorable. Yes, absolutely precious. Love. Mm-hmm. That's right. Damn straight. So I love this episode so much. This episode was great. It was very action-packed, which there's nothing wrong with that. Very action-packed. The animation was amazing. We got my big question moving forward. besides how the characters and the cat are going to fit into this world, which we're only on episode 4. We're only a third of the way through. We've introduced our main 2 characters. We've established Turbo Granny plot, dealt with the first batch of aliens, seemingly. Now it's going to be, my biggest question is, does Okaroon still have powers since Turbo Granny is gone? What do we do with that? Is he still cursed? Or what do we do with that? So that's going to be our question to get answered hopefully next week. But in the meantime, I hope you all enjoyed this reaction discussion. I'm curious to know your thoughts down below. But in the meantime, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'll be back real soon with more of DanDaDan. Bye!